So that's how they should deal with Kevin Rudd. What should they do about your newspaper, the Daily Telegraph, Piers? They had a front-page lead talking about a armada of votes and an invasion, and then there was this one. ALP to New South Wales dropped dead. That was based on the fact that the previous day they'd promised some money in Queensland. And then you get this sort of elaborate enhancement of Julia Gillard as a pensioner, and says that she opposed a tiny rise in pensions and yet she'll retire on $2,000 a week. Is it a bit of a pattern emerging here?
Well...
Proud of those front pages, Piers?
I beg your pardon?
Proud of those front pages?
I'm not part of the team that develops the front page, David, but I think that they're absolutely legitimate. Absolutely. They're not paid for. They're not the sort of glad-handing that Julia Gillard has courted from the women's magazines, which you were alluding to earlier, that I commented on all of the coverage that she has put herself out for.
Women's magazines.
Absolutely.
Well, have a look
with
at some
enormous circulation. Sorry, Barry?
Well, we'll have a look at some of those. Let's go on.
Well, I was going to say that, and when she was in opposition, she did 4 of the biggest women's magazines, including Women's Weekly, prior to this week's cover. And in one of them, I toted up the value of the gear she was wearing, David, which would interest you, given your fashionista sense.
I read it and I was shocked.
Were you $15,000 worth of clobber?
Did she own them?
No.
But she borrowed them.
Well, I presume that she was lent them to glam her up somewhat.
And therefore she's somehow guilty of wearing them.
Well, I think she's responsible for her own image, don't you?
I think I can cut right through this with some news that will rock you and the Liberal Party. I understand Tony Abbott is doing a 7-page spread in Men's Health. No, it's the rumour. It's the word is around in the magazine industry. He's got the cover and 7 pages inside.
And, David, I do seem to remember that Tony Abbott did a glossy spread with his family in Women's Weekly earlier in the year
in
as
a
well.
women's magazine.
He did.
In a women's magazine.
But would you not think, we'll go to your health issue, that it's a far better role model for young Australians to have a guy who's focused on physical health? And what I was musing on, because I thought that Tony's body shape might excite you somewhat.
No, Piers, I have to report
that he did show a certain rigour in his training for these extraordinary marathons and bike rides. But now he seems to have applied the same discipline to this campaign. And what's I think been interesting about the 4 weeks or almost 5 weeks we've had since Julia came to Prime Ministership is that we were told by the Canberra Press Gallery that the Labor Party management was the superior one and they had the better candidate. And what we've seen, in fact, is that the Liberal Party management is superior and they have the better candidate. So whereas the scales were weighted
I'm not sure
like
that was true of the first week.
And now it's gone like this.
You know, perhaps the second week. In the end, what though, Lenore, do you think would be of the most benefit or detriment? Would it be a 13-page spread in the Women's Weekly, or would it be a few headlines like we just saw in the Daily Telegraph?
I think some of those Daily Telegraph stories are really very damaging for Labor, particularly the one about pensions. I mean, that was based on this leak out of Cabinet, which is a sort of an unrebuttable leak because it's a he said, she said conversation in Cabinet. The leak went to Julia Gillard assessing the pension rise and paid parental leave on the basis of their political benefit. Now, we all know that both sides of politics do that, right? I mean, as one of the things that they assess a policy on is how it will benefit or not benefit them politically. And one of the reasons Tony Abbott went for his big paid parental leave policy back before the election was that he needed a game-changing policy with women. I mean, they both do it, but we're not supposed to see it. That's supposed to be like sausage making, and the Labor Party had all the gristly bits of the sausage out there on display. And I think the perception has been created in a lot of places that in some way Julia Gillard succeeded in knocking off a pension rise or decreasing the pension. And in those Western Sydney seats that are so important, I think that's hugely damaging to the Labor Party.
But I think by holding the press conference the following morning and appearing apparently more honest than she ever had before, she actually validated the leak. And maybe that was a That
She validated the lead.
In what way do you...
She answered it pretty effectively, didn't she?
Well,
I
she
mean,
said...
She looked good. She looked like a Prime Minister for a few minutes there. She did not look like a puppet.
Yes, but...
And she looks like somebody who's sort of bottled up all this anger about the leaks, not really knowing where they're coming from, and then finally directing them where she needs to direct that anger, and that was at the opposition.
And she made the point that she was assessing those measures on the basis of whether they were affordable, which you'd hope people would do.
Yeah, but why didn't
was
she...
that the leak was also about whether she'd assess them based on their politics, and that makes a little
But just on another issue, though, why is it, though, that the government is now in opinion polls behind in terms of economic management? During the global financial crisis, they shot ahead and well ahead, then and now they've slipped back.
I think they've really failed to make the case that Australia got through that crisis better than most other countries, and Tony Abbott has made the case about the debt and deficit argument. Now, you know, the coalition at the time said we should spend about $20 billion less than Labor, which means that they would have the same debt minus $20 billion, and they're promising to put the budget into surplus in the same year as Labor. So really the debt and deficit argument isn't all that it seems to be, but it's being wielded very effectively by the coalition.
But I think that it was also a very good economic argument to show that the government is making claims about its spending that can't be verified, because you'd remember, Lenore, that the Aussie dollar dropped by 37%, I think, in the August-September, before August 2008, which essentially cushioned all of our export industries at a time when our iron ore and coal exports were rising.
There were a lot of things going on. The interest rates were relatively high and they were brought down.
4
The
points.
currency fluctuations came into play, all of that. But I think most economists looking at it would agree that the fiscal stimulus played a big part as well.
But
the political difficulty of selling a good record is that what they have to sell is things that haven't happened. You know, we didn't go under in the Great Crash, and now inflation is down. Food prices have risen only 1.4% in the last year. That's a terrific result.
Yeah, but utility prices are up, David.
Yes, of course they are. But the point is that it's very, very hard to sell to people what people take for granted.
Yeah, but people see their electricity bills, and in some states, Queensland, I think 34% increase.
Cost of living
just quickly,
has barely
the
risen.
Labor Party's announced that it's launching its campaign 5 days out from the election. I would have thought that what they desperately need right now is a circuit breaker, and if you want the attention on something, it's a campaign launch. The media will focus totally on that. It's very late in the cycle.
It's very late in the cycle, and it's also a bit of a boondoggle because it allows them to keep their staff on public salary until the moment of the launch, which is not a good look. And you would think that next week is the week, or this coming week is the week where they need to start rolling out some big and interesting policies.
Very quickly, Peter, have to move on.
Okay, I think the Liberal Party people still feel that they have a huge mountain ahead of them. But anecdotally what's being reported back from all the electorates is that the Labor people are starting to get very angry and frustrated, and it's with the Labor Party.
Okay, more with our panel shortly. David Marr, here's Ackerman and Lenore Taylor. But now, here's Mike Bowles and Talking Pictures.